So do you remember the first time you heard Gene Vincent?
Yeah, it was on the radio about 1956 when Be-Bop-A-Lula first was a big hit. I think it was #1 in the American charts, or very high. And my sister, who's 4 years older, got a record player, and that was one of the first records she bought. So I played it over and over again. I'd never heard that kind of frantic singing, but he wasn't shouting. He was it was tense, but very almost whisper-like the way he sang. And there's a slap echo which I'd never heard, and amazing guitar playing. 2 guitar solos in a pop single. Brilliant solos as well. I studied Cliff Gallup solos, to the point of obsession. I didn't even know what proper guitar to have, to get the sounds. And finally I found out that it wasn't Russell Williford, whose picture was on all the posters for the movies. You buy another album cover and Johnny Meeks is there, but it was Cliff that played all the stuff that really got me fired up. I never even thought I was going to play the guitar around that time, really. And listening to Cliff Gallup and hearing his stuff, his work on the albums, made me realise that all the insults that were aimed at the rock and rollers, and that they can't play their guitars and all that, I heard different. And that's when my ears pricked up and I started to try to copy Cliff. Although it was difficult to apply that style, because the music we had to play was more like sort of ventures, more kind of dance stuff. But that style has become ingrained in my style. You'll hear it every so often. There'll be a Cliff-ism there somewhere. The first time I saw him, I think, was 60, when he very first came over. I think it was 1960, and it was Kingston, Granada. He came on in a green suit, and that was the Gene that I knew. But where were the blue caps? There were some guys there that I didn't recognise, and we almost, me and my friend, were blue caps fanatics. We were shocked, A, at seeing Gene, and B, at not seeing the blue caps. We couldn't cope with it. But of course we didn't leave, and he was amazing. And the band were good as well, but they just weren't. We were really disappointed that there wasn't Cliff and the rhythm guitarist, Wee Willie Williams, and Dickie Harrell. We were all disappointed as hell, that they weren't there. After the first concert, there was some bunch of girls screaming in front of me, saying, "We're going to go around and touch him. We're going to." And I went, "No, you're not." I couldn't bear the thought of anybody touching my star. I didn't want to go that close. I wanted to just have him up on stage in the majestic spotlight, as I saw in the movies as well. The film Girl Can't Help It, was still the greatest example, not only of Vincent, but also the rock and roll, film anyway. It was a great film, a little bit comedy, a little bit of drama at the end, where the gangsters try to get, Mr. Miller, I think it is. But what a movie. I mean, it's still fantastic now. That was the thing that really did it for me. Not only hearing Be-Bop-A-Lula on my sister's record player, but being taken to the movies with my sister, showing me this film. Thank you, sis. Yeah, Hot Rod Gang I've played over and over. That's really, really good. Gene's a pretty good actor in it. He's pretty damn good. Not embarrassing like you'd imagine, but I mean, he was like the threat to Elvis at one point. Then it tapered off after the second Blue Jean Bop came out, and then that wasn't quite as big a hit, and so it went spiralling down from there, I guess. But he lit a fire in London and never went out. When he came to England, he couldn't. Apparently, this is just me and the way I saw it, that he was hugely popular and was moulded by Jack Good. He never wore black leather or the medallion until Jack Good said, that you can't wear those hillbilly clothes. And I thought that Jack was more of a theatrical entrepreneur, that he willed his kind of look on Gene, and that worked because everybody loved it. I didn't particularly care for it. Yeah, you could argue that Jack killed him, or he made him. He obviously gave him plenty of TV exposure, which he wouldn't have had. But I used to sit watching whenever Oh Boy was on and thinking, this isn't the real thing. This is Gene, the real thing, in an English sort of weak, you know, musically not happening at all. I mean, there were sort of saxes going on and organs going on, and it wasn't the hardcore rockabilly stuff that we all knew should be there. It just wasn't there. It was very lightweight family entertainment. And then comes Gene with his black gloves on, threatening, but it just didn't wash. Somehow those programs didn't do anything for me at all. He should have let me produce the shows. I'd have sent the others on their way, got the blue caps over, and staged a show that would have ripped the house down with, you know, and paid them properly, and kept a good watch over them in the medical sense of the word, you know, because they were just left to their own devices then. They had a thug roadie that used to apparently, you know, really throw his weight around. I'm not going to say any names, but I know that what I'm saying is true. You know, I heard it all firsthand. The thing is that when the hairstyles changed from greasy bunches of grapes at the front that he had into floppy hair, then Gene was old news. That the whole fashion thing changed, even though hardcore rockabilly fans, rock and roll fans, would not have a Beatle haircut within a million miles of them. The whole winds of change were there, you know, with Bob Dylan, the Beatles and the Stones, and Gene was like yesterday, you know, and even though he survived and become massive in the rockabilly memory, he still was cast aside as being yesterday, you know, like your Johnny Tillotsons and your Bobby V's and all that. They all went as soon as the Beatles came along. It's amazing because they survived and they've carried this sort of notoriety and grown in status ever since. But dear old Gene, you know, I mean, it's the way he died as well, you know, it's tragic, you know. He wouldn't have his leg fixed properly, and I think people had the factor when they saw that he had a fault, you know, like a bad leg. He wasn't sexy, you know, really. I mean, he was just looked like a psychopathic killer, you know, on stage. But that's why I loved him. According to Peter Grant, who managed Zeppelin and me, after that we got a few, you know, little telltale stories about him. And he was not easy to work with, you know, threatening people and getting drunk and stuff like that, but always put on a great show. And then one of the best quotes of all was from Johnny Meeks. He said, when Gene died, he couldn't even die right. He said he couldn't even get that part right. He was in such a you know, turmoil with his life. And the English thing was what probably killed him, the fact that he had just enough of a career following to sustain, but it went almost back to where I was, you know, like in the early days, playing in pubs and scraping a living. You know, I couldn't stand to watch the decline. But he was recognised, but like I say, the Beatles swiped all that away, you know, unless he went on a package tour with Little Richard, and you know, they had a 50s retro kind of thing going, but he was left more or less in the wilderness of London and England in general, and then Germany, France. France was big. He was big down there. Well, the Beatles, for a start, we all know that they started cutting their teeth on nightclubs in Germany, real dumps, you know, playing for 10 hours on the trot. And Vincent was there, and they were all in cahoots. And they all loved Be-Bop-A-Lula. They loved Vincent. They loved the whole mystique of him, you know, and the way that he used to deliver his songs, and threatening and creeping around the stage and throwing his mic up. You know, Rod Stewart pinched that, you know, that bit of holding the mic in the air. That was all Vincent stuff. But yeah, a lot of people, I'm sure, although you talk to a lot of people today that know all about the Beatles, and they go, who the hell's Vincent, you know? It's sad because there's not really in-depth information ready to hand, you know. Now you look at the TV, what, 500-600 channels of nonsense, and no mention of anything to do with the history of rock and roll, not that I can find anyway. Because I don't see any live Cliff. There's not one single piece of movie footage of Cliff Gallup, which is amazing. You know, for a guy that was only in the band for 9 months, there was no footage. They did do what was it? What's the big show?
Perry Como.
Yeah, Perry Como, that's right. And some guy lost it and just threw away. Some packing boy went, don't need that anymore. I hear, anyway. Well, yeah, that was it was partly a sort of an excuse to show off that I knew a little bit about Cliff's style, and also the Playboys were around, and they just knew the exact feel and the sounds that we needed. You know, the right attitude on the drums, the upright bass was there, and before you knew it, we had a pretty damn good sound like the Blue Caps, the original Blue Caps. And also, I was short of an album I was behind my, so I released that along with it was a stupid idea. We released it as a double package along with the soundtrack. They just couldn't get an album out of me, so I said, well, what about this? At least it's a heartfelt album that, you know, it took me years and years to perfect this style. Someone may as well hear it, you know, in that framework. So it was a tribute to Cliff, really, because nobody, you know, you could talk to anybody in the music business and go, what? Yeah, you know, James Burton because of Elvis, but the heroes I really admired were the ones like, you know, Cliff Gallup, Paul Burleson, who was on the early rock and roll trio records, and Johnny Burnett, and also like, well, there weren't too many real hardcore rockers back then. Scotty Moore, but there were just three of them. Sad that people don't have the capacity to enjoy what went on previously. They have to sort of iron it out like it never existed in order to receive the new. You know, those Beatles fans wouldn't be seen dead in a Vincent concert, you know. And I thought, what's up with you? This is part of the building blocks why we're all here, you know.
Yeah.